Blog Talk Radio.
923, I'll give you a corrected address. So we do have a fire in a one-story ordinary. Looks like it's about 40 by 120, 125. We'll get your traffic control. Squad 5, Squad 5. And go to 273, 273. And go Battalion 18, 18th Battalion. Go to 273, 273.
Good Tuesday evening to everybody out there, and good evening and welcome to Fire Engineering Talk Radio and another installment of the Professional Volunteer Fire Department. Today is Tuesday, August 8th, and I always like to say that. I always like to give the date because so many of us listen to these later on. We store them on our computer and listen at a date down the road, and when you're downloading them and organizing them, it really helps when the host, I think, gives the date because you kind of figure out where you're at in your archives. So thanks for listening in wherever you happen to be and whenever you happen to be listening in. And if you're live, thank you so much for joining in, and maybe we can get you to call in tonight. But thank you for being here. Thank you for helping to continue to spread the message that we're here to talk about tonight. And again, that message is being a professional firefighter absolutely in no way has anything to do with earning a paycheck. It has everything to do with delivering competent, compassionate, and competent service, training hard, being as prepared as you possibly can, and no matter what role it is that you play in your hometown volunteer fire department. It's about taking care of not just the customer, but our members as well. Our precious volunteers, no matter what role you play. And I could do a whole show on its own on all the different roles that we have out there that all make a volunteer fire department function. But it's up to all of us working together to strive to be as professional as we can and earn that badge of professional firefighter. And tonight's show is sponsored by Honeywell and DuPont and their FDIC scholarship program. We are so thankful to them to, again, be helping us out. And, again, they are providing an incredible opportunity for a deserving firefighter to attend FDIC 2018. Here's the kicker. All expenses paid. Airfare, food, lodging. A full scholarship, a full ride to the premier firefighting event, the premier firefighting trade show, the premier firefighting training event, FDIC 2018, coming up in April. And you can all play a part in helping a deserving firefighter get there. If you know a firefighter who maybe has made a remarkable contribution in your local fire service, we'll certainly nominate them by going to Honeywell DuPont FDIC Scholarship.com and nominate your firefighter. Maybe it's a firefighter who's done a notable or superior work, whatever their role is in their department. And as I said, there's a lot of roles out there. They don't have to be frontline firefighters. Maybe they've provided distinguished leadership or dedication in some capacity to your community, or they had a program that they implemented, or an outstanding initiative, or a best practice, or simply have incredible passion for passing on knowledge and helping train and improve your department. Whatever it is, go to Honeywell DuPont FDIC Scholarships.com and nominate your candidate, your firefighter, today. Information's available on fireengineering.com, or again, it's Honeywell DuPont FDIC Scholarships.com. And if I get a chance, you know what, I will post that on my Professional Volunteer Fire Department Facebook page. Thank you to them for again continuing to sponsor these great fire engineering shows where we can help spread the word about what it means to be a professional firefighter. Couple notes, couple observations since we last talked. Hey, I got lots of good feedback, lots of comments and information and emails regarding our last show, which, if you remember, back at the end of June, we talked about female volunteer firefighters and the important role that they can play in this great fire service of ours, and the great role that they are playing in so many areas. We covered so much information in the show with our special guest that evening, Chandra Davis, talking about the various challenges females may face, as well as the unique skill set that they bring to the table, and how they certainly can help fill the ranks. And as we point out, we all need more members, and this is a very important recruitment opportunity as well. And we pointed out that the female population as a whole, they're much more likely to volunteer for things than their male counterparts. And actually, I think it's like 3 times as more likely to volunteer for things than men are. And we do have more females today serving than ever before, and that's great, but it only represents 9% of our fire service. So think about how that could help your department increase its membership. Think about how departments nationwide, countrywide would benefit by getting that 9% number to 15, 20, maybe 25% or more. But anyway, coincidentally, after that show, a couple items of interest came across my desk. In addition to all the positive feedback and emails I received, a couple of pieces of information came across my desk recently that I thought were important when it came to that subject, and that's females in our fire service. NFPA, the National Fire Protection Association, just this week, or it might have been last week, but just very recently, they released a report and also a fact sheet that studied the patterns of fire-ground injuries to our female firefighters. It's very interesting, and it's worth a read. 35% of those experiencing injuries, by the way, were volunteer female firefighters. But it's an interesting report. It's on the NFPA website. If you go to nfpa.org, you can find a link to it. And I thought you would be interested in maybe reading that and checking that out, because it was so timely regarding that information coming out just after we had a good show regarding female volunteer firefighters. And then another interesting thing that came across my desk was researchers at the Center for Fire Rescue and EMS Health. They are studying the health and well-being of our female firefighters and females in the fire service. They got a grant. They got an assistant to firefighter grant, so they're putting a study together. And what they're finding is there's been a ton of research about the health of firefighters, but most of that research is focused on male firefighters, and they really want to do research on female firefighters as well, and their health and their wellness. So there's a link I'm going to post on my Professional Volunteer Fire Department Facebook page. If you're not a friend of mine, please go to my Facebook page, Professional Volunteer Fire Department. Give it a like. I'm constantly updating it with some information, articles, motivational sayings, things like that. I'll put a link to this survey, and please, our female firefighters out there, check it out, pass it on to other female firefighters that you know, and they really want to get some information and put a good study together. So I told them I would help spread the word, and again, very timely considering the fact that we just had a nice show on that last month. So I will put that up on Facebook, if not tonight. It'll definitely be on there tomorrow. So that's the news that's been coming across my desk. I know all of you out there stay on top of the news, so I'm not going to reiterate probably a lot of the stories in that you did read. But here it is, August 8th, and we're into the dog days of summer, and I hope everyone's having an enjoyable summer. I just got back from a family vacation, did quite a bit of driving down south, put 2,200 miles on my car, going down to the great states of Georgia, South Carolina. Just a wonderful time, but you know, as I drive around the country, I'm probably a lot like you, and I know you probably all do this as well. I'm always looking for those hometown volunteer fire departments. You know, you see that little sign on the side of the road with a fire truck on it, signaling that they're coming up to a firehouse, and inevitably I slow down because I want to see the firehouse. I want to get a look at it. And I have 4 children and my wife in the vehicle with me, and over the years they've sighed and they've made fun at me. But the funny thing is now they're pointing those signs out to me before I see them. So I thought that was pretty funny, and they're always encouraging me to pull in if someone's in the firehouse to talk to them and hang out and inevitably exchange shirts, right? That's what we like to do. But anyway, in addition to noticing all the signs on this trip and pulling into a few volunteer fire department driveways and things and noticing just meeting so many great people. I also noticed in a lot of towns, a lot of small towns and communities, the signs for the field days, the chicken dinners, the volunteer fire department picnic that's coming up. And it just struck me that they still play such an important part of the rural American fire scene. That's definitely interwoven into the fabric of our communities in so many areas. And, for all the struggles and all the pleas for additional members that we need and for pleas for better funding, communities around the country, by and large, still look forward to these events. They still flock to them and support their local volunteer fire departments at these picnics and these field days. And they do serve such an important purpose. The community, in a lot of cases, doesn't know that they're helping purchase some very needed equipment. For all the fun on the rides and all the great food that you find at these, it is a community's way of offering support to their local fire department and helping provide them with desperately needed funds to purchase that very equipment that's needed to allow them to do the job that's required. And while, in my opinion, it is so admirable and so telling of our dedicated volunteer firefighters and what they mean to the community, it's also kind of a shame, isn't it? It's kind of a shame that for everything else that they do, putting their lives on the line and responding to the community's call for help, that they have to hold a chicken barbecue or a field day to purchase the equipment that they need, to purchase SCBA, to get that brush truck, maybe to get a defibrillator or get the necessary life-saving equipment. By the way, not just saving community members' lives, but possibly their own. That they sell tickets and cook hot dogs and pour beer. Oh, yeah, they set up and they clean up. Oh, and they train, too, somewhere in there. Oh, and then respond to emergency calls. Yeah, what a testament indeed to the great volunteer firefighters. And, it's definitely something to think about doing a show on. I think I definitely am going to do a show on that down the road and all, these great field days and community events and what it takes to put them on and what they mean, not just to the community as a fun thing to do and to show their support, but to the firefighters as well, because it gets them some funding that they need to purchase that needed equipment. Could you imagine if our soldiers had to do that, or our police departments had to, to purchase the equipment they need? But we do it, don't we? Because we're professional volunteers, and it's something that we do. Hey, if you'd like to reach out tonight and call in, I always like to give the number, talk about that, talk about what's ever on your mind, talk about what we're going to be talking about with our guests tonight. The number is 760-454-8852. We'd love to hear from you. Call in to talk about anything going on in your local volunteer fire department, our great American or international fire service. Or how about calling in and talking to our guest tonight? I am so honored, so humbled, and so excited to have him on tonight's show. I have the legendary Mike Lombardo on tonight's show. And if you don't know who Mike is, then you've probably been under a rock or not paying attention to the fire service for the last couple of decades, just a couple of decades, right? But Mike definitely is what I like to say, a firefighter's firefighter. He has definitely walked the walk, and he continues not just to talk, but to walk the walk. And he has an incredible national presence, and I'm proud to say he's also from my great hometown that we're also both so proud of, and that is Buffalo, New York. And Mike has been in the fire service for 40 years now, 40-plus years. He served as a commissioner and also a chief in the Buffalo Fire Department, in addition to being an instructor, and he's helped teach at FDIC and so many other conferences. He's also a recipient of the Firehouse Magazine Heroism Award, actually received that twice. He received the FDIC Tom Brennan Training Achievement Award. I could go on and on and on. But, oh, yeah, Mike Lombardo is also a long-time volunteer firefighter who definitely shares in our message that being professional has nothing to do with earning a paycheck, even though he did in the Buffalo Fire Department for many, many years. But he definitely is very passionate about the fire service. And with that being said, Chief Commissioner. I don't know where I start. What do I call you? Chief Commissioner. Whatever. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, Tom. And Mike would be great. How are you?
That's so nice. We're doing great, and like I said, we are just so honored to have you. I appreciate you taking the time tonight in the middle of summer here to set your schedule aside to come back on the show, or to come on the show and talk to us a little bit about some great topics that we have lined up for tonight. And again, if anyone would like to call in and talk to Mike, again, the number is 760-454-8852. But Mike, before we get into some of the topics, how about you expanding on that bio a little bit? What sparked, pardon the pun, your desire to get into the fire service, and what's your journey like? What was your journey?
I started out maybe like a lot of guys. My dad died when I was 2 years old, and I was a kid that hung around the firehouse in Buffalo, Engine 38, Ladder 13, the 7th Battalion. And even as a little kid, hung out there, and along the way met a lot of great guys, and went in the service. I was in the Air Force for a few years, got out, and I got on the fire department. I was very fortunate to get on the fire department. Even when I was in the service, myself and another guy down in Florida, where really my first involvement officially was. Down in Florida, him and I started a rescue squad outside of our base in a place called Bay County, Florida, where Panama City is. And we started that. We had a 1943 Cracker Box ambulance like they used to have on MASH.
Wow. That's awesome.
It was fun. We outfitted that as a rescue truck. We probably had about 8 or 9 members. And we responded to fires and emergencies around the county, at least the east half of the county all the time. And we became, it was a pretty interesting operation. It was a lot of fun. It was very different, certainly, than Western New York. You'd go 15, 18 miles and there'd be nothing in between, So it wasn't built up like it is around us. And then when I got on the fire department, I spent few decades there, had a good time, ended up as commissioner for 4 years, and right before then, the last year, I went back to Battalion Chief for a year. And since I've retired, I'm still a firefighter. Most of the time in Buffalo, I was a firefighter somewhere out either in Amherst or Lewiston or Hamburg, wherever I was living at the time. I was in Williamsville and East Amherst and Scranton and the village of Hamburg and Lewiston one. So I had involvement in all those places, and since I've retired, I've moved down to Delaware. My daughter-in-law, my son, and my 2 grandkids live about 15 minutes away. That's a good impetus for us to be close by. And
absolutely.
I'm a member of a place that's a combination department up north, about 80 miles away, Christiana, Delaware, Christiana Fire Company. Very busy place, about 13,000 plus runs last year. Of that, about 3,400 fire runs, and we do a pretty good job of keeping 2 engines in a truck staffed 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
And that's 100%. That's all volunteer, Mike. That's all volunteer.
It's a combination, but a lot of the fire side is volunteer. We usually have a career lieutenant who is on fire duty 95% of the time. And then we'll take an ambulance crew of career guys with us on a fire run. But otherwise, the rest of it is done on a volunteer basis. But it's a little different than what Western New Yorkers would be used to. It's a duty crew type operation. So you go
Mike, I'm hearing more and more about that. Can you expand on that? Because as I travel around, and I've talked about it on the show a few times, you're seeing more and more of that, right, where people are signing up as volunteers, but they're filling shifts.
Right. And so what the duty crew does is we come in and I'll go up for 24, 36 hours and just staff a unit. And we routinely and part of it is we are busy. Last year there were 82 working fires in the district.
Wow.
Part of it is we are busy that we do attract, but routinely we'll have people from obviously Delaware, but Maryland, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, New York on apparatus. So a staffed unit, I mean, you can't beat the response time of a staffed unit, walking into the apparatus floor, getting dressed and getting on the rig versus no matter how good you are, responding from home is still going to take some time.
Right. That's the
so
benefit of these duty nights.
Yes, and people do all different kinds of things. I've seen Broome County outside of Binghamton does engine 98 and engine 99 on each half of the county, and they do it during the day. And it might be on the one unit. It could be using your area as an example, Tom. It could be a guy from Snyder, a guy from Gettsville, a guy from Williamsville, a guy from Eggertsville, all on the apparatus staff that day. And it's a different way of doing it, but it certainly does a pretty good job.
I can imagine. Is training an issue? Because you might have people on there you really don't know.
So we have our own, in Christiana, we have our own recruit school. You have to come to us with training, but then we just actually went through it this weekend, and we have a recruit school that's a couple of weekends where we go through all kinds of things that we do. We're a very procedure and riding position-driven department, so we have riding positions for each apparatus, for the engine, the truck, and those different positions have different tool assignments. They have different assignments on the fire ground. And what that allows us to do is we are then able to train to those. So we can, part of our training is to train people to meet a position. So to start out on the ladder, let's say, your first position might be the hook and can or the irons position. And that would be because they'd be with an officer. Okay? They'd be teamed up with an officer. Where the outside vent person is going to be someone that you wouldn't jump in that position originally because you'd be operating independently somewhat. So you may be going to the rear of the building to give a report of the conditions in the rear. Your assignment brings with it carrying a 24-foot ladder and a hook to be able to provide any type of VES, vent enter and search operation in the rear of the building. You're in radio contact with the officer, but you're not in physical contact with them. So
Gotcha.
We would be working to train people to each different position. And it's a great way to it's a great way to push directed training. I'm a big believer in riding positions and standard operating procedures. It amazes me. A lot of departments really don't have a lot of them, and they, we work out whatever our officer does when we get there. But I'd much rather have predetermined decisions made that we could still vary from, but at least we have a game plan to start with and a playbook to start with, and then we can change it. We can deviate from it, certainly, but it gives us a starting place to go from.
Yeah, Mike, if you don't, I'd like to ask you, because what you just talked about is something I actually put in my presentation. I call it having a playbook. And what I have found is not everyone has, for example, let's just take our bread and butter fire. There are departments where they have to be told to hit a hydrant, or they have to be told to pull the crosslay. And I always thought it would be better to have that pre-planned ahead of time. And you said, yeah, you can change it up. I used to say for compelling reasons, an incident commander can change anything he has to. But unless you're told differently, let's have everything pre-rehearsed so we know when we pull up to that garage fire what we're going to do, or that second floor fire, or the so that too many times chief officers in our volunteer departments have to basically give a step-by-step dictation on what order to do things in, and that can really bog down an operation.
I agree 100%, and I think it's such a big deal. And I go all over the country, doing classes, and it's amazing how many places don't do it. And you're absolutely right, Tom. And I just think that I don't know how anybody could possibly remember every single thing to do. For instance, our first two truck company officers in Buffalo, are tasked with making sure that there's no fire below grade. And that's in our SOPs. And it may seem like a simple little thing, and anyone could say, well, you could remember to do that. You could, but if you study to get promoted to do that, whether it's in the career side or the volunteer side, if it's something that's required of you, if you train to it, then you are much more apt to remember it. But also, it's also going to keep us safe and sound a lot better. But all those SOPs, one of the arguments you get is, well, every fire is different. Well, you're in Western New York, and I'm born and raised in Western New York. Every snowflake under a microscope is different. But when you get a couple million on a shovel, they start to become pretty much alike. And
yeah,
it's sort of like, you're right. Every fire is different to a degree. But one of the things I tell classes all the time is I'm not that concerned, believe it or not, with the fire. I'm concerned with the building. I'll look at a single-family dwelling much different than I will a warehouse. But it's not so much the amount of fire in it. When I pull up to the house, that's on fire, I'm basically treating that the same every time. Just like you're saying, with those standard procedures. I know, in Christiana as an example, I know our first due engine is laying in every single time. Not when they see smoke or fire, when they get an address. If they're going on a box, they lay in at the hydrant. The first due truck, OV goes to the rear with a ladder. The inside team's heading inside. The officer and the irons guy, if there's only 3 or 4. The driver is getting the aerial, the jacks down and the aerial set to at least go to either the roof or the fire floor, depending on the situation. But those things are done every single time. The other thing it does is we get good at those things.
Sure you do.
A big part of our job is practice over and over and over the same thing. Not just training. Training is great. Learning something new, learning how to do something. But once we know it, practicing it. Because you know what? If I am able to stretch a hose line with my crew 45 seconds faster than I was able to 2 years ago when we first started practicing, we'll never be able to prove the negative, but that's a big deal. That's a huge deal. We will never know the life that the truck company saves because we got in and knocked the fire down. Or the firefighter wasn't killed because the floor didn't collapse because we got in and knocked the fire down. 45 seconds or whatever it is a big deal. And when we can do that, that's huge. And the only way we can do that is if we practice and train in it. And part of that is training, but part of that is doing it on runs. One of my little pet peeves in this world is first alarm staging. To me, when when you say, Snyder 9, Snyder 1, pull into the block, everyone else level 1 stage, to me it might as well be everyone else go to sleep, don't pay any more attention to this run because it's obviously bullshit. And that's not the case. And the thing is, I'd much rather you come in and do what you're normally going to do. And you know what? If it's nothing, that's okay. We're going to be back.
It keeps you sharp. Keeps you sharp.
Sure it does. No one's going to so much that can't be done. San Francisco, California, I was out there, I did some work last year. San Francisco, California, big fire department, big city, on a box, first due engine to the front, lines to the front door of an apartment building. Second due engine is laying 2 feet, going to a hydrant. Third due engine's at a different hydrant. First truck to the fire floor with the aerial, second truck to the roof, and a ladder to the fire escape of the building. And, Tom, that'll be on an automatic alarm.
Wow.
And you know what?
You don't see that everywhere.
I respect that. And that's what we do. That's what we do with Christiana. We do it over and over and over. Guess what we're pretty good at? All those things.
All those things. And what do they usually say when bad things happen? It's the little things that start the chain of events that contribute to the bad thing.
Sure is. And little things kill it.
Yeah, absolutely.
So like I say, I'm not a big fan of stages. You have a second or third alarm, certainly there's a place for staging. But on a one-alarm fire or a response, do whatever you're going to do. It doesn't hurt anybody. It's good for it. It really is.
Yeah, I can give you an example that go ahead, Mike. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I was just going to say I could give you an example of we have a pretty strict SOP when it comes to apparatus positioning. We're very strict about where the first engine goes, where the first truck goes, where the second engine goes. And when I was chief of department, I would emphatically say even on the routine call, you're still parking the way we want it done at a fire because it gets you in the mindset. You're in the game. And when that fire does happen, you don't even think about it. It's automatic.
Well, and it's just those aren't the things there's a lot I have to worry about and think about. I don't have to worry about those because I know how to. And the other thing is you go to that automatic alarm, you go to that response for, some kind of smell in the building, whatever it might be, and if you do all those things, even if it's nothing, think of the benefits. Oh, I learned where the numbers on that street are. This one's the oddball. The odd numbers are on the north side instead of the south side, or whatever. The hydrant works because I flushed it, where we never would have found that. Look at the entrance to this place has two entrances, and the front entrance only goes to the second floor. It doesn't go to the third floor, too. There's a million different things we can find, even without a fire at the location. And it's keeping us, like you say, it's keeping us sharp. It's keeping us capable of what we're supposed to do.
Without a doubt. Matter of fact, go ahead. No, go ahead, Mike.
You were talking about training, and the little things, like you said, are so important. One of the little things we do as simple a drill as guys walk up in their gear to the door of the firehouse, and they have their tools, a hose line, whatever, and they have to put their face piece, hood, helmet, gloves on, clip in their air, and walk through the door with the tool or the hose line or whatever the case may be. And we time them. And sometimes, guys, you could time them with a calendar. We start on Tuesday, we finish on Wednesday. That's not good. And these are the simplest little things that doing them helps us. Sit in front of the TV at the firehouse when you're there and just do it again. We do that drill at the firehouse, and my best is 8 seconds. And I see guys, They look like putting gloves. I never take my gloves off. Those gloves belong to me. They're very fortunate in Christiana. They probably are in Snyder, too. They give me a face piece. I don't have to have one off the rig. So that face piece is mine. It doesn't need more than one little pull on one tab. All the rest are set. So I don't take my gloves off. My helmet goes between my legs. I don't kneel down because I'm old, because I'm only going to be able to get up so many more times. So I'll save, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I put my helmet between my legs. I throw my face piece on. My hood's ready. I pull it up. I put my helmet back on, and I go. I see guys with their gloves. They look like OJ during trial trying to get their gloves back on. I mean, it's pathetic. And
True.
Those are the little things. And then the other one, I always ask, why are your gloves so tight? Well, it's easier to work. I go, it's also easier to burn your hands. Like some of the littlest, smallest things we don't work with guys on. So I think it's such a big deal to be able to practice and do things and do them over and over and over again. It really,
one thing that happened to me when I got out as chief of department, which is 5 years ago now, I can't believe it, but one of the first things I noticed, and I actually developed a drill or encouraged our officers to work on this, and we actually did a drill on it, and we're going to do it again, but I realized as I was sitting in the back seat now of the fire truck, the cab, I was struggling to put the seatbelt on and get the SCBA on the way to a box because I hadn't done it in so long because I had been driving in a Chiefs vehicle for 15 years. So that's one of our drills. You talk about coming through the door with on air with a tool. We have a drill now where the firefighters gear up, get on the rig, and get the seatbelt on and the air pack on so they can get proficient at it. Simple, maybe some people look at it like stupid, but it shaves seconds off and makes the operation go smoother in the long run, and you're not, like you said, looking foolish on the fire ground, stumbling around, trying to get the seatbelt off or whatever the case may be. It's just, you look more professional.
And it's so, so important. It really, really is not only all that important, but the same with people when we lose firefighters, when we have firefighters seriously injured. So often it is tiny little things that are all survivable, but sadly they come together in a bad way and come and get us. And all those little things you can do to be better. You know, that FCBA shouldn't be a foreign thing. The last thing I should worry about is that I should know that so well that it's just, I don't even have to think about it. And that just comes from, it doesn't come from reading about it or watching a video about it. It comes from having it on your back and breathing air in it. You know, I started in 1933 as a firefighter, and my boss, we had an old, this was way before fitness equipment or anything else in firehouses, and there was a bicycle in the firehouse, a regular old bike. And I used to get on the bike and ride around the fire truck with the SCBA on. And, you know, to this day, I'm an old man, and I'll last as long or longer than most of the young guys because I'm just, it's just not something I have to think about. You know, so it really is important. It really is important. I can't stress enough how important those little things are. And like I say, using procedures and riding positions, what a tremendous training program you now have. Hey, listen, we want to get this group of guys up to be drivers. We want to get this group of people up to be able to ride as the nozzle, as the backup. One of the things I see, a common thing that I think is a mistake, it's my opinion. I ask people all the time, you're a newer officer and you get a pretty new kid with you. So you're on the engine, where are you putting them? And people routinely say, well, I'll put them on the backup. And I go, really? And I go, I'm going to put them as the nozzle. And they often get surprised. I go, no, because I'll be with them. But the backup position, you know, we used to call it the roving linebacker. You're back and forth, back and forth. You're running around like crazy, up to the nozzle, drop back to the next bend, get around that bend, get back up to the nozzle. And again, there's some independent thinking and some independent action involved as the backup position. So I'd like that brand new guy right with me as the nozzle. And you know what? If we have to change that midstream because of the fire we pulled up to, so be it. But that's where I'm going to start out with them. And those are the kind of things. Just we can train. Okay, I got this guy squared away to be the nozzle, squared away to be the backup, squared away to drive the ladder truck, to be the errands person, to be the hook and can, to be the OV with the, you know, operating independently, whatever the case your department sets up. You know, training to that is a great way of setting up a training program. I've always said, too, if you have real good riding positions and SOPs, it even helps you buy a fire truck. So you're buying a new engine. Hey, you know what? We always had this guy do this. So why don't we make it so they can reach that and do that very easily from the ground? So as an example, let's say you lay in, right? When you are coming up to the scene, you drop at the hydrant and lay in. Well, you know, we have a valve, a HUMAD valve or whatever type valve you have. So we have the HUMAD valve. It's mounted at the back. The hose bed we make sure is no higher than, let's say, 4.5 feet, 5 feet off the ground, so that we can grab that hose without having to step up on the running board. And we can do that, but wouldn't it be even better if we didn't have to, right?
Well, I'm a huge fan of low hose beds.
You know, those are little things that really matter, you know?
Yes, they are.
You know, we're buying a ladder truck. So let's buy a ladder truck, and we know that this guy needs to take a 24 about 95% of the time with him and a hook. So why don't we mount them together on the new rig rather than the guy having to run around the fire truck to grab stuff? It's just when we start looking at procedures and positions, it can start to direct a lot of what we do as a department all the way around and really make it
absolutely. You know, one of the things that comes up every now and then when we talk about riding positions in the volunteer service, one of the difficulties that people bring up is they don't know who's showing up at the firehouse, so they don't know if the person is going to be okay with the assignment, whatever that seat assignment might be, or sometimes the rig's leaving and those seats aren't always full in the volunteer firehouses, so now the incident commander doesn't know that necessarily, so the rig gets there and those jobs might go unfulfilled because there was no one on the rig to begin with in that seat. So you definitely got to make some adjustments, I would think, with that.
Absolutely. And the thing is, you know, it comes down to how you respond as a department. So does one guy take the rig and everyone meet him, which is fine. I mean, there's not an absolute right answer for everybody. Where I operate up in Delaware, we would never operate that way, but it's because a lot the nature of the community. But you take an area that's 60, 70, 80 square miles, predominantly rural, and the firehouses at one end of it are more that way, it would be perfectly plausible for guys at the other end of the district to meet an apparatus at the fire. But that doesn't mean we still can't staff those positions in a certain way. And that goes back to training people to be able to, we want to make it where that's your goal as a firefighter. I came in and I want to be able to sit in that seat or that seat or that seat and make it's worth something. You know what I'm saying? Hey, I've made it. I can sit in any position on that apparatus. That's a big deal to me. And you know what? Maybe I won't be able to, and that's okay. But it's certainly something to strive for. And like I say, it can direct our training very, very well that way. And
you bring up something. We've been talking about it a little bit already. And I know I've read a lot of your articles. I've talked to you a lot. I know how passionate you are. But one of the issues that continues to come up in the volunteer fire service is unmotivated firefighters when it comes to training, or I don't have to go to that drill tonight because I've already done that twice or 5 times, or I've been in 30 years, so I know how to throw that ladder. So I wanted to pick Mike Lombardo's brain about how we can motivate our firefighters to attend training and how we can put a decent training program together in the volunteer fire service. And I love your one quote. I did see one of your quotes where you said the area that you feel has the most impact on firefighter safety and survivability is training. And I agree with that. I think all professional firefighters do. But the volunteer fire service, from what I'm being told as I travel around and talk to firefighters, is struggling in enticing members to go to that weekly training drill. Let's hope it's weekly, but to go to that training drill.
Right. Well, so I do think it is a tough thing. And part of it inherently is organizationally it's harder, no matter what anybody wants to say, because we can't say you have to be here tomorrow. So you're right. Part of it, though, is that we do, and this is not just in the volunteer fire service, in all levels of the fire service, we do get bogged down a little bit more and more today by requirements that are so stringent that we end up in a problem of trying to do something beyond what's required. So there's, I think we have to be as imaginative and flexible as we can when we deal with requirements. One of the things I always try and tell people is, and this goes for all departments, career or volunteer, there's nothing wrong with your training program. And what I mean by that is, people are always looking for the certain training program that they need. And I say, we look at a lot of things. I look at IFSTA stuff. I have a friend that is one of the big people in command there, and I always ask him, my wife told me when I became commissioner, when you write something, make sure you read it out loud. And better yet, have somebody else read it, because sometimes it sounds stupid. And we have some of those things that exist today. One of the things that's in the latest edition is to show a room's been searched, we close the door. And that's good, but I always say, Tom, I'm the brand new firefighter. I graduated from firefighter 1 and firefighter 2 last week, and I'm going to a fire with you. And I'm nervous, and you're saying, Mike, it's going to be okay. We're going to this fire. This is your first real fire. The chief wants us to search the second floor. When we get up there, I'm going to take the rooms on the left. You take the ones on the right. Okay. And I get up there, and we start down the hall, and you go in the first room on the left, and 30 seconds later, I'm back. Mike, did you get those rooms on the right? No, someone already did. The door was shut. Did we really think that one out? Or the other one I'll see a picture in a book showing, one guy searching with 3 guys holding on to the next successive guy's leg. And I always say, why do we do that? And they say, well, for safety. I go, so if the front guy drops dead of a heart attack, the last 3 guys have no idea where they've been. We're just following him. It's no different than the thermal imager that the battery died and we didn't know where we were.
Yeah.
There's a lot
Chief
of
Salka. Chief Salka has a great line on that and says, if you have to hold on to the boot of the firefighter in front of you, then you shouldn't be in there in the first place. You should be trained and proficient before you're going in. Then.
Well, and I agree with John, but even more so, I think it's more dangerous than not doing it. And all I'm getting at is there's a lot of things out there that we just automatically are there, and whether it's HIFSTA or whatever program that's out there that they're there, that they're just really, frankly, aren't right. I talk to people, there's career departments now that have 28-week recruit schools, which is a long time. And all I'm saying is that, if you graduate from Mass, or if you take firefighter 1 and 2 and you come to the Snyder Firehouse and you go, listen, there's 3 things they taught you, we really don't do it that way, I think that's fine. But if you have to go, listen, there's 103 things that they taught you that we don't do it that way, then we need to revamp our training program. So having said that, that's why I get back to, we have to make sure this thing's going to work for us. You have to have bloodborne pathogen training by law, not a rule, not a Snyder Fire Department rule, but a New York legislated law once a year. And I know that's wonderful. But, Tom, if you go into the bathroom in a couple minutes and shit all over your hands, you'll still wash your hands, even if you're training by a month. And all I'm getting at is that, we don't have a law in New York State or anywhere else that you have to stretch a line every year, do we?
No.
Or a law that says you have to raise a ladder once a year. I mean, that's scary. So I think we have to get back to basics as a bigger organization as well as the local department. The only other thing I'd say is that, so the Snyder Fire Department, how I would do a training program is I would have a weekly drill theme. So we might have a drill on Wednesday night, and I'm not sure what night you are, Monday night, whatever it might be.
You hit it right there on the head. It's always Wednesday.
So we're going to do a drill on Wednesday night. And every week we have a drill. But there's components of that drill. So it might not be the entire thing. That any member coming up during the week, a couple of guys at the firehouse, they can do it. One of the things I think that's important is the drill doesn't have to be 3.5 hours. It's great. It can be. It's wonderful. You have a real good drill, and 3 hours later, wow, that was great. But you can also do 25 minutes. That's a tremendous help because the drill on Wednesday night is we're doing ladders, and it's putting the tower ladder up. It's getting every ladder off the rig, not only raising it, but maybe making sure everything's good, the halyards and everything else, extending them, retracting them. But you know what? 2 guys are at the firehouse on Tuesday afternoon. They can look and go, oh, they did ladders. We're going to go throw the 24 or the 28 or the 35. Just one ladder, and we're going to put it away, and it'll take us 20 minutes, but we did a drill too because we couldn't make it Wednesday.
Yeah.
And I think
I always said
that's
the guys and gals have time to come in and maybe watch TV or wash their car. So take some time and make yourself a better firefighter. You're in a firehouse. Be a firefighter for a few minutes.
And it takes nothing. One of the things that I always get is people go, well, we don't have any facilities. Listen, you have a fire engine, so you can pretty much do almost anything you need. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And there's a lot. I always say, too, everybody has, like, the maid that the department built. I always kid that, they have something about 12 inches by 12 inches, one opening. They go, how would you deal with that? I go, I'd go somewhere else. I won't fit, But,
hey, Chief. Hey, Mike. Hang on.
Yeah.
We actually have a caller calling in, and if you don't mind, I'll bring them on. Maybe they have a question for you or have some information for us. So let's bring in the caller. Area code 302 is the area code. Let's see. Hello there. Welcome to Fire Engineering Talk Radio. Who do we have here?
Hey, it's Cody.
Cody, where are you calling from?
Cody, I'm calling from Washington, D.C. right now.
Well, thanks for calling in. What can we do for you? What's on your mind this evening?
Question for the chief. How are you?
How are you?
I'm good. Working. So, question I have is you, and I've had this discussion before, the professionalism in volunteer firefighting. How do you work on changing the mindset of a group to be professional as a volunteer?
Are you asking me or Chief Lombardo?
Chief Lombardo.
So I think Tom could answer that too, but I will tell you, I think that you have to never ever lose sight of why we're there. And, in Delaware, I've been in Christiana, which is the busiest fire company in the state, and I was a member of Port Penn for a little while, working part-time, which was one of the quietest places in the state, and you still can't lose sight of the fact that that's what we're here for. We're here to help people, and they really are counting on you. And they don't care. When you look down that hallway and you can see a foot off the floor and that's it, it's all black. And just at the end of the black, you can see a couple of boots moving away with some stripes around it. They don't care if you're a career volunteer, if as an officer you're appointed, elected, voted in, whatever the case may be, people having an emergency don't care about that. And the other biggie is that, the old cliche of, we do go to a lot of runs, a lot of places. And I know a lot of times they are basic, common runs. They really are often the worst day in the world for the people we're going to. And we can never lose sight of that. A little compassion goes a long way, as does a little sympathy and a little empathy. And I think all of that is part of it. And I think it's big from a leadership perspective that we portray that to the rest of the troops so that they understand how important it is.
Yeah, it starts at the top and filters down, and leadership is so important. Lead by example. I mean, you get a new member, and you hate to say it because especially in this day where we need members, you don't want to scare them. But I used to tell them, you are volunteering for something that can kill you. And other than the military, who else does that? And
Right.
Mike, I think you had a line too. The longer it's been since your last fire, the closer you are to your next fire, and you need to be ready. You need to be prepared. And it might not be a fire; it's just any emergency run. People expect competent firefighters to show up and help them. And it's a mindset that we need to get into the troops.
Hey, Cody, you still there?
Yeah, I'm there, Chief.
How is the firefighter in D.C. doing?
Good.
He's better?
You're on the job tonight, Curdy? You're in D.C. tonight working?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Thought I heard some sirens there.
Yeah, no, the real problem that I had volunteer-wise is being in a leadership role, getting people that have been around for a long time to change their mindset that they need to be a little more professional or up to what the expectations of the public are. And I had a lot of challenges trying to get people to change that mindset that, there are expectations, and they just didn't see it that way. They thought it was okay to be substandard because, I'm just a volunteer.
Oh, I hate that line. Don't you? Hate that line.
Yep.
I'm just a volunteer, like it's some excuse.
Right, and don't you feel at times that really, other than the volunteering part to start, the rest is the same? I mean, no one's expecting less of you. No one has a home on fire or a kid choking or whatever the emergency is and goes, they're volunteers. It's not a big deal. That's not the expectation. And I don't know how – the only thing I think that we do, and I'm not saying in this case, Cody, but the only thing I think in general is I think sometimes we can fall into not getting that out enough to ourselves. Do you know what I mean? Like, I think sometimes we do fail in the sense of, no, this really, really, really is important shit we're doing here. And we got to make sure that everyone understands it, and we sort of give it a little bit of a take it for granted a little bit because we don't, we're in the midst of it, and we don't want to sound overly important or anything else. And in reality, it's very important what we're doing.
And, I like to try and find people, like-minded people, to surround myself with and make short changes. In other words, it takes time. But you mentioned that it was the older guard that wasn't cooperating. Well, eventually that older guard will be gone, and now hopefully it would be your turn to shine and the people you surrounded yourself with. And like I said, I like to surround myself with like-minded people, try and get some leadership training to understand how to work with people of all different learning curves, all different education levels, understand that we're all on the same team. And it takes time to try and motivate and encourage. But if you treat people fairly, and hopefully you can find people that share that passion and that belief that we need to be professional, then hopefully your time comes where now you're running the show and you've got like-minded people along with you and you've made an influence on these people. And then as new members join, they're seeing these professional leaders and they they lead by example. So it's not easy, that's for sure, if you're getting some pushback at the top. But I believe good overcomes evil all the time, and I think change can be made. I think. And you got to keep the message out there that, again, this is a service that people expect us to be top-notch, whether it's an EMS call, the CO detector that's beeping in the middle of the night, whatever it is, people expect professionalism. And I would remind my members, don't you expect that when you go and have your car serviced? Don't you expect it when you go to the eye doctor, when you go even to the supermarket? You just want to be treated by people that know their job, are nice to you, right? As was it Chief Brunacini always says, what is Mr. or Mrs. Smith going to remember? That a group of people showed up, they took care of the problem, and what's the bottom line? They were nice. And if we exemplify that and we do that day in and day out, hopefully we're impacting others to feel that way and act that way as well.
Well, and I think the other part of that is, I think we can never lose sight that it's a marathon, it's not a sprint. It's every single day, sometimes a lot, sometimes a tiny little bit. But it's every single day. And that goes, whether it's training, whether it's motivation, whatever it is, it's every single day. And that's a big part of that, I think.
Yeah.
All right.
Well, thanks for calling in tonight. We really appreciate it, and I hope you have a good shift.
All right, thank you.
All right, you take care, brother.
All right, see you, Chief.
Hey, Mike, we have another caller. This is, I think you'll recognize this area code, a 716 area code. So let's see. So that's our area. So let's see what local firefighters calling in here tonight. Hello, this is Fire Engineering Talk Radio. Who do we have on here tonight?
Evening, Chief Morrell, Chief Lombardo. This is Chief Morrell. This is your Lieutenant Bastido.
Oh, it's a lieutenant from the Snyder Fire Department. Thanks for calling in tonight, Lou. I'm glad you've been listening.
Absolutely. No, I can't always catch them, but I actually running the kids back and forth. I had a few minutes to listen in between, so wanted to give you a call in.
Oh, great. Well, thanks for doing it. Do you have a question for Commissioner Lombardo or Chief Lombardo or Mike, whatever we're going to call him?
Mike is good.
Well, I don't know well enough to call him Mike, but I guess kind of follow on to the last caller's comment. I mean, I think the challenge with being a professional department, whether you're a career or volunteer, is definitely comes down to the mentality. And I think what I've seen in different volunteer organizations, and I won't say it's us or fire service in general, but I think some of it is we got to set aside kind of the generational gap. And I think the more you look at it, our newer up-and-coming firefighters sometimes cast off kind of all the experience of the old guard, and they misunderstand them. So I think it's maybe the old guard kind of been there a long time. We kind of look at them and thinking they don't have the same perception that we do on the professionalism of it. But when it comes down to it, sometimes you get, a little younger, you can be a little gung-ho, and, you kind of come into a situation, and if you don't have a family, you don't react to things the same way. I'm kind of a little bit older when I finally, found my home back in the fire service, and, I kind of knew what I was coming into and understand, what the importance of what we're doing. And you want someone, like you said, coming in, you want someone coming in professional who's, coming in there, understanding, compassionate, being careful when they're coming in, not just kind of coming in like a bull in a china shop. And you understand that, it could be the worst day of their life, even though it's a routine run for you because you've, done 10 of those that day. So I think, a lot of it comes down to that. It's both sides. So I think really a lot of it comes down to, we've got to take the energy of the new, and we've got to take the knowledge of the, the long tenured guard. I mean, the thought of losing 55 years of experience we've got in some of our corps now, it's a tragedy, and you can't possibly absorb that. But I think you've got to, take advantage of that. I'm kind of, preaching to the choir to both of you because you've been around much longer than I have. But, I think that's kind of where I looked at, I'm being a newer lieutenant and, not having as much time in, I'm trying to just absorb as much as I can from everyone. And, some of the younger guys have got in there, got a lot of energy, and some of the guys that have been around quite a while, you got to set aside your ego and absorb what you can and appreciate that they know more than we possibly can because they've been through, the crazy days when we had multiple fires a day, and now we're kind of at the point of, in some places, we're kind of itching for a fire, which sounds bad, but, you want that experience, and we've got to try and kind of take on what they've learned from, not necessarily having the fire, but, you go there, and like you said, you take that 5 extra minutes after run, pull up to this house, what would you do here? If you had a fire pushing out the second or third story, this window, what's your plan going to be?
Yeah.
So I think it's
you bring up Lieutenant. You bring
wrong.
Up the whole. You bring up the whole. That's definitely it's a quandary. The generational differences, and Mike, I'm sure you experienced that. You got on in Buffalo in the early '80s, I believe, right, or early '80s, was it, Mike?
Yeah.
You were, and so you were probably mentored. I wouldn't be surprised if there were some World War II vets still on the job then.
Oh, it was mostly World War II guys. Absolutely.
Yeah. So that's that generational thing. I'm sure you have it in Christiana, right? It's something that we need to understand. It's not going away.
One of the things that the lieutenant said that's so true is, everyone is a little individual, and even these groups are, you get the older guys who immediately dismiss every young guy as, everybody wants a trophy and blah, 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 whatever the cliche goes along. And then, the young guys are like, oh, well, he's an old dinosaur guy, and he doesn't know what's going on in the new world, and so on and so forth. And in reality, we all know that it's probably all somewhere in the middle. There's real good young new kids coming up, and there's great old-timers that have tremendous amounts to offer, and everything in between. And we can't forget that. You know, every now and then there's tremendous wisdom both ways. Like you see that one guy who, you know, watches TV at in the rec room, and all of a sudden something comes out, and you're like, wow, where did that come from? But he really knows what he's talking about, but doesn't say much. You know, everyone's not the same. And the same with the young kids, you know. I always am told about how, you know, this new generation, they're not like everybody else used to be. I go back to when Chip McCarthy and John Kroon passed away in 2009. The Washington, D.C. firefighter recruit class taught their instructors, worked out a thing where they could come in on a Saturday to make up the training. And they came to that funeral all on their own. They rented a bus and came up. That's pretty impressive for a new generation that really doesn't care about anybody. That's pretty impressive. So it's tough to put labels on anything, and I think if we can stay away from that, we'll all do better.
It's what I like to call respect. Both sides, everyone needs to respect each other. And you know what? I've heard this said a number of times, and I'm a firm believer in it. Yeah, every generation's different. Every generation brings different things to the table. But at the end of the day, we can still make them firefighters. It's all about bringing them in and showing them the way. You can't expect them to know the way unless you show them the way. And we show them by leading by example. And we can teach them how to be a professional firefighter. And, you know, I think the other thing that's important, Mike, and I had this in a question I was going to ask you earlier, was the senior firefighter is a hugely important position. And now we know how it is in a lot of paid departments. Heck, in New York City, I know at 20 years they get a big dinner. And it's almost like an officer position, you know, for lack of a better term. It's just such a respected position. But in the volunteer ranks comes rite of passage in some cases where, well, I've been in 20 years, I don't have to train anymore. Training requirements in a lot of cases are lowered. And I think that can be a detriment because, again, we need to be on our game. And I think Mike Lombardo's still training pretty much every shift. And I think anyone listening out there, if you got 20 years on, 30 years on, and you're still what you consider a firefighter, you should be training, correct?
Absolutely. And you're 100% right. That isn't you're not done.
No, not at all.
And you're not done at all. And that goes back to leading by example. You know, one of the things that I did a lot of training with external departments too. And I do stuff, and routinely I'd have chiefs say, well, I'm going to have my junior officers run. And I'm thinking, well, that's great, chief, but how many fires do you go to that you don't want to take the opportunity to run it right now yourself? And it's great for the younger guys to learn, but they can also learn by watching you. You know, I always sort of kid, sort of not kid. You know, when I walk up as a chief officer, I'm sort of evaluating the fire, the building, but also the crews I have operating. But don't kid yourself. You know, if I'm the RIT officer on a RIT team or a FAST team, one of my evaluations is the building and the fire and so on. And also, wonder how this chief will be. And I know this guy, he's going to be great. God forbid something bad happens. I know exactly what I can expect. Or it might be, oh, I know this chief, and this isn't going to be good if anything goes bad. And all I'm getting at is that, you know, we don't want to be in a position where we don't let our troops see us operate. So the higher up you go, I think you ought to be doing more, not less. But that's me. Yeah. But I just think that that's a lot more successful.
And it helps build a good, harmonious operation, too, because the older firefighters are mixing it right up with the new members, and people get to know each other, and it's just, I think it's good for camaraderie and morale, and so, Lieutenant,
and hopefully
go ahead,
that
Mike.
Senior man has something, and hopefully that senior man has something to show. You know,
Mm-hmm.
They have something to, one of the things you do get, it's a common human trait is, well, I don't want to do stuff because I don't want to look bad because I'm like the officer or the guy, so I'll just hang back. And you know what? Nothing is more, sorry about that, nothing is more, I think, enlightening and inspiring to people is to see someone make a mistake and deal with it and learn from it. And I mean, even if it's a little tiny thing, that doesn't make you look worse. It makes you look way. Just don't know how to realize that. You know what I mean? We don't want to be afraid to do stuff. We'd actually like to do it.
And that's why we call it training and practicing. That's
right.
The time to do it. Right?
Absolutely.
Lieutenant, did that help?
No, that was great. Yeah, I think, the last thought I had, I think a lot of it comes down to, and, we talk about brotherhood, you want to talk brotherhood or sisterhood, but, don't make it a, brotherhood my butt. I mean, we're all in the same thing together. I mean, Chief Morelli, you've said it 1,000 times, fire doesn't care if you're, paid or volunteer. We're all in this together, so take advantage of that, and we, there's a lot more we don't know than we know. Nobody knows everything, so it's, appreciate your insights and your time tonight. So, keep it up, and appreciate everything you both do to, keep the fire service and keep us thinking on our toes.
Awesome. Well, thanks for calling in, Lieutenant, and I'll see you at the big one.
Yeah, absolutely, sir. Have a good night, sir.
Or on the training ground.
Well, I'll be there tomorrow.
All right. Excellent.
Thanks,
nice talking to you. And I just want to take a minute here to remind our listeners that this is Fire Engineering Talk Radio and an installment of the Professional Volunteer Fire Department. And thanks to our sponsor, Honeywell DuPont, and their scholarship program, which is going to provide a opportunity for a deserving firefighter to attend FDIC 2018, all expenses paid. And if you know a deserving firefighter who would love to get that scholarship and attend FDIC, please go to the website HoneywellDuPontFDICscholarship.com and nominate your firefighter. Thank you, Honeywell DuPont, for sponsoring Fire Engineering Talk Radio and this installment of the Professional Volunteer Fire Department. And we are talking with Mike Lombardo, a firefighter's firefighter. Enjoyed success as a paid firefighter, but he's also been a long-time volunteer as well. And he is sharing so much great information with us tonight. If anyone else would like to call in, again, the number is 760-454-8852. And we'll be here for just a bit longer if you'd like to call in. Mike, you holding up okay?
I'm doing fine, Tom.
Excellent, excellent. Oh, we're just so glad you're here. And, I want to talk two quick things on training, and then I'll move on to a couple other things I wanted to talk about tonight. But I believe it was your belief, I think I read once that, the majority of civilian fire fatalities are at residential fires, people dying in ones and twos in their own home. And I think I read once, too, everyone wants to be on the high-angle underwater bomb squad. But your take on and I know this word sometimes gets overused, but we need to hammer the basics, don't we?
Look, you're absolutely right, and I talk about that all the time. 85% of people who die in fires die that way, at home, in their own bed, in their own home, ones and twos, with their loved one. The other thing pretty dramatic is of fireground firefighter deaths, almost the same percentage. About 80% of us die at residential fires. And, it is important to do the other stuff. I sort of, kid about the tech rescue, high-angle underwater bomb squad stuff, and everything else. But look, we can't be ready enough for what we do every day. The United States military does training and everything, but their training is commensurate with what they do. So if 60% of what they do is X, 60% of their training will be on X. They'll do the other stuff too, but they do what they do the most. And that's where I think we fail a little bit. You know, you see the guy, well, I've put an SCBA on, I've stretched a line. I know how to do that stuff. And I would argue maybe not. Not that you don't know how to do it, but you don't know how to do it anywhere near as well as you think. You know, we see guys doing all those basic things, and particularly as a chief officer, you know, you sit there watching guys force a door, and it looks like the proverbial monkey doing something to a football, you know, and it's pretty tough because we just are not that familiar with it. So we have to practice what we do much more. And it goes back to a lot of the things we've already been saying. But it is where we can make a difference. The other thing is, if you respond later tonight in Snyder to, you know, a big warehouse fire, look at everyone puts on a differing degree. From New York City, they'll have 10 tower ladders up and, you know, a fully involved warehouse, to the smallest place in the middle of nowhere is going to have a few lines and some tanker shuttles going. But the outcome is going to be pretty much the same. But that bedroom fire in a house on Berryman or whatever street, you can make a difference. You can make all the difference in the world at that fire. You can save their loved ones. People go to bed at night hoping that someone like you or whoever else is out there listening is coming to get them out of the most hellacious conditions on the planet Earth. And that's a working fire in their home. I mean, if you really think about it.
And the Washington firefighter that asked earlier, was his name Kurt or
Cody?
Cody, I'm sorry. Cody had a great question about how to get people to embrace the professionalism that we're talking about. Mike, what you just said, I hope he hears that. If nothing else, take that back to those naysayers, those older members, those non-participating members. Repeat that, Mike. That is hitting the nail on the head. So true. Say that again.
It really is. And they may not be doing it consciously all the time, but people are sitting there in their homes hoping that someone like you or someone out there listening is going to come and get them out of the worst conditions on earth. That's a working fire in their home. And even when we talk about property, you know, it's funny. We had a lot of deaths in Buffalo. 18 guys died during my career. And it was very, very, very sad and tragic. And we'd have different voices from the public. When we had a guy seriously hurt or killed, you'd see the letters of the editor. Why were they in there? Why did they do that? But then we'd have a fire that involved property, no deaths of civilians or firefighters. And it was, why didn't they save my stuff? That was everything I had. That business, I didn't have enough insurance. It was my life's work. Even property, people count on us to save everything. And can we always know, but we certainly should be in a position that we're able to at least try. That is what we're here for. It's a biggie.
Yeah, so well said. So well said, and in such a way that, such a comments there for professionals to look to, paid or volunteer. And we briefly touched on one thing that I want to shift gears a little bit and get into, Mike. I want to get your take on, and again, it's another volunteer touchy issue, and it's the role of the company officer. In most volunteer fire departments, it's an election. In some cases, it's an appointment. It gets into personalities. It gets into popularity. Gets into politics. And I like to point out that, you know, politics is everywhere. I always say my wife was a PTA president, and, you know, we were involved in Girl Scouts with my daughters. And, yeah, politics is everywhere, and it's something that's got to be dealt with. Mike, you certainly know that. But in our volunteer fire service, how do we develop good, competent officers and make them realize how, I guess your line, what you just said about being ready is true for an officer too. I mean, you hold your members' lives in your hands, but there's a few trains of thought. Is it better to have an enthusiastic officer? Is it better to have an officer that has very good technical competence? A combination of the two? What's your take on our volunteer company officer and their role in the volunteer fire department?
So I've been in a bunch of volunteer fire departments and a lot of different organizations. And what I mean by that is I don't mean just separate, but different way they ran. I've seen places where the chief is elected, he appoints everybody else, all the way to where I've seen literally everybody in the rank structure is elected, and every sort of combination in between. And I do have some feelings about it. I think that one of the things that a lot of departments could do, it's just my opinion, is all officer positions were 2-year terms. Because you're absolutely right. Politics, small p, it's not, Democrat, Republican, but small p politics comes into every bit of it. And if you were elected lieutenant or chief or whatever rank in between for 2 years, I think that there'd be less of a feeling of I have to do everything thinking about that next election. And that would help a little bit. But the other part is just what we just were talking about. How important is this? I always used to kid that we'd be way better served if they put the siren and air horn button in the back of the rig and those guys could hit it. Then I wouldn't be so much in a hurry to sit up in the front right seat to blow the siren and blow the air horn, because, it is so much more than that. I see a lot of places where literally young kids are jumping in the front seat of a fire truck. That's where they're jumping. And this is something that's a little bit more unique to the volunteer fire service and the career service. You see that young guy jumping in that front seat, and on top of that, you see the very senior guy driving only. And first of all, I think we can teach other people to drive. You talked about females in the fire service. They're fine driving. There's not a lot of stick shifts anymore. My daughter was a firefighter in Buffalo. My wife was a stickler. She made my kids take their road test on a stick shift car. But my daughter one day was working at Engine 16 and was about the only person in the firehouse that could drive a stick. So she ended up driving the pumper that day because it was an old reserve rig. But all I'm getting at is that, get that senior guy back in the front seat. Teach the newer guy, not the brand new guy, don't get me wrong, but teach the younger guy to drive too, so that we all get a little experience. But so we also pay the right attention to the person in that right front seat, because it's not just the person who's here a lot or the first one at the firehouse. It really is a critical position. And, just like we talked about civilians, the bigger thing for that guy in that front seat of that fire truck is you got to turn your head, look over that left shoulder and go, all these people's lives are depending on me now, because they really are. You're going down the street on that fire truck, and those people sitting next to you and behind you, now you're responsible just as much or more than anyone else on that apparatus for their lives and safety. That's not a little thing. So we have to give it that much. And then I think the technical side of it, I don't want to say is easy, but if we're all on the same page, we know what we have to do to accomplish getting these people squared away. It's whether it's grasped and adopted and embraced by the organization, the department, that we really want to do that. But if we do, the specific things I think can get easier. We can train people to do that. The harder part is getting everyone to think that that's a good idea and getting on board. And it's not always the easiest thing, Tom. I mean, you're 100% right. Some people are, we'll just throw Joey up there, or whatever the case may be. And not always necessarily the best idea.
No, and I think, too, one of the things I like to talk about, and I think you'd agree with this, you were known when you were the commissioner, you were known to go around, you visited people, you got to know people. I think I heard you say once that sometimes they were bitching at you because there wasn't a contract in place, even though you had absolutely nothing to do with it. But that's part of your job. Now, granted, maybe lieutenants and lower-level officers aren't at that position, but they still need to know their people, and know that people need to know that that officer has their back. Trust, right? A huge factor.
Sure it is. It's why we do what we do. You know, the fire service, Tom, has gotten into this whole, them and us and so on and so forth. And I always, people always ask, who comes first, the civilians or us? And I go, well, it's a twofold question. And the example I use is I think there's a strategic answer and a tactical answer. The strategic answer is that absolutely civilians come first. The Snyder Fire Department exists. The Buffalo Fire Department exists. The Christiana Fire Department exists to save people's lives and property. And if that isn't somewhere in your strategic goals, then you're in the wrong, your department missed the boat. However, having said that, Tom Merrill, a couple of years ago, was the chief of the Snyder Fire Department. You're out in front of a 3-story garden apartment, Tom, and you got fire on the second floor. Mom is hysterical that her 2 kids are on the 3rd floor. As you're sitting there, you got one engine in with a line. As you're sitting there, Mom's hysterical, pulling on your sleeve, Tom, and all of a sudden, here comes the truck. Where are you sending them right now?
The truck crews up to get the engine crews are getting water on the fire.
So the truck to get those kids, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, exactly. You're sending that truck crew to get those kids. But just as the truck walks up to you, the radio goes, Mayday, 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 from that first engine. I think we all know where's the truck going now?
Yeah.
To go get firefighters, right?
Right.
So tactically, it's a twofold answer. It's the same as, you and I crawling down the hallway, and it's junky in the hallway, and at the end of the hall is the woman unconscious, and just as we get there, or almost to her, I drop. You're probably taking me out. And all I'm getting at about that is you're talking about trust. The reason we're able to save people is we know we're going to be saved. That's a lot of it. A lot of it, of the whole trust we have, is that I know I can go a real long way in that place because you're going to come and get me. And I have all the trust. It's absolutely blind trust that I know you'll do that. You're going to come and get me. And that makes me able to do things that I could never do solely by myself. And I think that we always have to remember that. So that's part of that whole point of sitting in that right front seat. Are you ready to do that? Is a young firefighter ready, willing, and able to do that? Are you squared away enough? And that is a question that's tough. So it is sort of twofold. It's the individual, but it's also the department. Because is the department ready? We talked early on about procedures and positions, and I talked about staging. I think every fire department, every training academy, every class talks about complacency being real bad. I apologize. Another run. Complacency on the fire ground, right? And I think you'd agree it's a bad thing, right? Complacency is not good. But, we see some of those things we talked about earlier. We see what I like to call institutional complacency. So on one hand, the department's saying, don't be complacent. On the other hand, they're saying, this is probably nothing. We'll send either nothing or almost nothing to that run. Because you know what? It won't be anything. So on one hand, we don't want guys to be complacent. But on another hand, we're being complacent as a whole department because we're saying, well, nothing's going to happen. So, you know what, stage out there in the middle of the intersection or whatever the case
right.
is.
Right. The terrible C word, complacency.
And we have to fight it on every level, ourselves as well as institutionally.
Yeah,
but yeah,
absolutely.
So for an officer, what do you want a guy? Do you have and I'd ask you, do you think there should be a time and grade requirement? Is there a training requirement? Is it a combination of multiple things? What do you think
Right. I think what I find in the volunteer fire services, we're desperate for officers in a lot of cases, because it's a lot of the older firefighters in the volunteer fire services getting very old, but they've been there, done that, and they're moving on into their later years where they're doing less. And in a lot of cases, we're putting young people in the officer position for a few reasons. Number one, they're young and very enthusiastic. Nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with youthful enthusiasm at all. Number two, their time schedule, their time constraints may not be as constrained as the 30-something Lieutenant Pastita, who called in earlier, a great example. 30-something-year-old firefighter, young family, but the demands of the job now are really kicking up, and that, I think, is a common theme for a lot of people in their 30s and 40s. So it's hard to get officers in that age group. So
I find
there's
that,
something to be...
I find that... Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to... Go ahead. What do you find?
No, I just find... I agree with you 100%, and I would take it one further. A lot of volunteer departments I see, that's what's the missing group. There's young kids, and there's old farts like myself.
Me
but
too.
It's tough. the 30 and
Yep.
40-year-old is tough, and a lot of it has less to do with the fire department and more to do with society. I mean, it's such a draw and drain, on jobs and so on and so forth.
Jobs, that's when you're having your children or your kids are getting into travel baseball or hockey or whatever the case may be.
Sure.
There's several of our officers in my department alone, and I'm sure people listening out there, you share these stories too. They're running every weekend. It's baseball game, it's soccer game, whatever, school event. Oh, the boss needs this done. I got to go out of town for work. So they get officers they got to do more now as an officer. So it's hard.
Sure.
It's really a difficult thing.
It is.
However, and back to the premise of your question, there's again nothing wrong with youthful enthusiasm. And again, we're putting people in there sometimes because they've got the time. They're going to college. They're not working full time, or even if they're retired, then they're an older person, but they've only been in a year or two. But okay, with that, to me, comes an obligation, and I think it's a twofold obligation. The department has an obligation to prepare them for the leadership role by supporting training. In the paid service, it's easier. They can make it part of their day that they go to training classes for officer and leadership development. Volunteer departments, we need to make it available, whether you're bringing people in, whether you're sending firefighters to conferences locally, nationally, whatever. I think you need to support that. That's from the department side of things. And then the officer themselves have a duty and an obligation to say, okay, I'm in the game. What do I need to do to make myself better? And that's embracing training. It's embracing staying a student of the game by reading and going online and checking out the latest things. And I'm huge on getting to know what makes people tick. You've got to understand people. They're not all going to be like you. I like to say you can't control the hand you're dealt, but you can play your hand. You've got to learn to play the hand you're dealt. But you've got to take that seriously enough to say, okay, how can I get better? Read some leadership books. Go to a seminar by Mike Lombardo or John Salka or Rick Lasky or any of the great leaders out there, Frank Vescuccio with the Step Up and Lead. You've got a duty and an obligation to yourself to we've talked about technical competence a lot tonight and going to training drills, but you've also got to learn to deal with people, because you can order them to do things, and after a while in a volunteer company, you're not going to have anybody left to order. You've got to inspire them and make them want to do things.
Absolutely.
And
it isn't easy. It really isn't.
No.
But
no.
it's very important.
And that's step one, realizing it's not easy. So, and hey, if anybody, just one last time, if anybody wants to call in, again, the number 760-454-8852. I got Chief Mike Lombardo, Commissioner Mike Lombardo, on with us tonight, and I could go on and on, but I did want to just one more thing, if you don't mind. And you know what? I think I still have about 4 pages of notes, and I just told myself, Mike, we're going to do this again if that's okay, because
I'd love.
I wanted to get into your red flags and things tonight, or in radio communication. So we're going to save that for another show, because an hour and a half we've been going, and people, I find listening to the podcast myself, and an hour and a half, 2 hours is usually pretty good, and, people want to move on, But I want to get your take just quickly, since you're still really involved in the fire service, and I think we talked a little bit about it earlier, but today's new member. Someone walks through the door today. Hi, I'm Joe Smith. Hi, I'm Jane Smith. Nice to meet you, Mr. Lombardo. What are you telling them? What are you doing to mold them, or what do you think of today's firefighter, and the fact that they may not know a Phillips head screwdriver from a flathead screwdriver? Or don't you agree that we can still show them the way and mold them? What is Mike Lombardo telling a new person?
Well, so starting out, I told you my dad died when I was 2, so I was, oddly enough, a different generation, but I didn't know that Phillips had flathead too well either. I mean, maybe, but not much better than that. And there were a lot of people that, took me under their wing and taught me how to do things. I think it was, there was a lot of that teaching was couched differently. It wasn't, hey, come here, let me show you how to do this. It was, geez, stupid, what did you do? I remember one of the very first time I was ever an acting officer. I was acting at Engine 33. The officer was off. I didn't have a lot of time on. And we go to a run on French Street, and we pull up, and there's a mattress at the curb. And I get there, and we start, I call it in, 33's on location. It's a mattress at the curb. We'll take care of it. And the battalion pulls up. And it was a mentor of mine for many, many years. Harvey Supple was the battalion chief. And he
the legendary Supple brothers. We could do a show on that. We should do a show on that, but not to interrupt.
Sure,
but fantastic men.
Harvey looked at me with the cigar out of his mouth and goes, "Where'd that come from?" And I look at him, sort of smile, and goes, "You got me." And he goes, "Well, go find out." And a couple other things. I'm like, "Ooh." And sure enough, I ran upstairs and was like, oh, I get it, because the box spring was still up there and it was smoldering. So I learned a tremendous lesson. But the thing is, the teaching technique was a little different. It wasn't like, come here, let me pat you on the shoulder, but it's still learned. But I think we can still do that today. I think there's a lot of great kids coming in the fire service. I told you about the Washington, D.C. thing. But also, I think a lot of the things we talked about. Look at what you're getting into is really, really, really important, and it's important to people. I was always a big believer that we do critical incident stress debriefing. I always thought we should have done pre-briefing. Look at here's some bad things that you may see happen, just so you understand. I don't want to scare you away, but I want you to understand that. Really, some bad things might happen. It's sort of the nature of the beast that we're involved in. So I think all those things can go a long way. But, and the other part is, I see a little bit with people younger, but in a little while, they want to, I don't want to say ostracize, but they want to do you have to earn your your stripes, so to speak. And yet, to some degree, they do, but we don't want to chase them away either. We don't want to be sitting there where we're, making it so tough. A little razzing is fine, but making it so tough that they never want to come back. We don't want that.
Yeah.
So it's a fine line,
Right. Yeah, and again, I like to say, I like your pre-incident stress debriefing. It reminds me of a time I had a couple experiences where we had young men and women join the volunteer fire service, and we have them bring a guardian mom or dad or a guardian with them so we can explain to them what's going on. And in 2 cases, they thought it was some sort of a club. They thought that, I actually had somebody say once, you don't put the fire out, right? The real firefighters put the fire out. I say that in my class.
Really?
Isn't that funny? Yeah. Yeah, like, oh, what do you mean? You guys going to put the fire out? I thought you guys just supported them. Or they actually thought it was more of a club. And no, this is something that is very serious. And, your son or daughter could get seriously hurt or killed. And you need to be aware of that. And I think we need to remind our members that from time to time too. And
I agree. I know that sounds horrific, but you know what? Really, stop thinking that this is some, like there is a Rotary Club, and that's nothing against Rotarians, but there is a Rotary Club.
No.
This isn't that. It really isn't. No. As I said, you raise your hand and you volunteer, and they swear you in, and from there on, it isn't much different.
Right.
You can get killed.
Yeah. So. And when you sign on that dotted line, you're committing yourself to our profession.
Absolutely.
Way back at the very beginning, and you just mentioned it again, actually. You mentioned growing up in the firehouse because your father passed away early when you were very young, and that reminds me. That gives credence to another thing that I like to talk about from time to time, and boy, it would sound great coming from you. And I like to say that volunteer firehouses or firehouses everywhere, but again, we're talking volunteer here, they can be filled with tremendous role models for people that come in and join. And I know there's a firefighter who has given me permission to tell his story, and I know you know him very well, and it's a Snyder story. But I talk about Jason Zora quite a bit, who came to the Snyder Fire Department he came to the Snyder Fire Department as a 16-year-old who didn't really have direction yet in life, as most of us don't at 16. But he freely admits his life could have gone in 2 directions, one good and one bad. And make a long story short, he loved the fire service so much, and he had a few rocky moments with us where the chief had to call him into the office and help explain, hey, this is how we act as firefighters, and this is what the chain of command is. But Jason ended up becoming a Buffalo firefighter, getting assigned to the Elite Rescue 1, got the highest award for bravery, I believe, in Buffalo for making a rescue several years back, and he's now a lieutenant serving in Buffalo, and he's married, and he's got a family, and he fully credits his time spent in our little volunteer fire department for helping shape him and pointing him in the right direction. And I like to say in my class that I bet you there's thousands of stories like that nationwide. And here you come in tonight, and you have a similar story where the fire department shaped you and helped you growing up and pointing you in the right direction, surrounding you with great role models that you worked with years later. How great is that?
Oh, it's amazing. And you talked about Jack and Harvey Supple. I mean, Harvey Supple I've known since literally I was 10 years old, and God rest his soul, he passed away now. Jack's still going strong. Almost.
I see him every now and then. He's awesome.
He's doing great. But, they were, and other people may look at it, but they were tremendous men to me. And, there's external things. I mean, the explosion happened in 1983, and Harvey ran that fire for 10 minutes with a wooden stake the size of half the size of a bowling pin sticking on his neck, and 100 stitches later and a fractured sternum, and he ran the fire for 10 minutes. And his brother came in and ran the fire the rest of the night as the division chief, not really knowing the condition of his brother other than seeing him being taken off to the hospital. That's an amazing thing. You know, those people just don't exist today. But those are big things. But little things, like I knew Harvey since I was a kid. I went in the military. I got a letter from Harvey every week. Yeah, we had a couple fires this week. How you doing? Blah, 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 blah. And I'd write him back. And, you know, those are the things that people don't know about. And that makes them, you know, that's a leader too. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Those are
Yes.
pretty amazing people too. So,
yeah. Yeah.
And little life lessons, like I said, that little one I told you about that fire, you know, like I'll never, ever, 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 like forget that. And you know, I've certainly passed that along a million times to guys coming up. You know, hey, don't do this. What a dumb thing, you know. So we can learn a lot from those kind of people. And those are the guys, you know, it's the Tom Kenny. I mean, I knew Tom, so, you know, it's that kind of guy.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying?
And
They've been around
absolutely.
a long time. You know, they don't always have the delivery that some people are looking for, but the message is dead on, right on point. So,
yeah,
really important to keep in mind.
And as we finish up tonight, Mike, I just, you know, you're a man who obviously incredible amount of knowledge to pass on, and you continue to pass it on. And you've been on both sides of the floor as a paid firefighter and obviously volunteer. I'd like you to give your thoughts on the message of this program in my articles about professionalism and how, you know, volunteer firefighters listening tonight, what it means to be professional, how even though you're volunteering, and even though your department may only run 50 calls a year, or maybe it runs 5,000 calls a year, maybe you're well-budgeted, maybe it's not a well-budgeted department, all that aside, I want to get Mike Lombardo's take, because you're so well-respected, you're such a voice for the fire service, on what it means to be a professional and how it doesn't matter if you earn a check or not. It's all about how you approach the job.
Well, and it's like I said earlier, not to reiterate it and repeat myself too much, but people are counting on you. They don't really know what side of a line they live on, and they're really counting on you to come and get them and their loved ones out of harm's way. And I don't know what more motivation anybody need to be able to do this job correctly and well. And that's what it really comes down to. We all have to be professional doing it because their lives are counting on us. What more could you say about it?
Right. And if people wanted to reach out to you, I'm sure after tonight people listening in might have questions for you, or maybe they want to bring you in to do one of the many great presentations that you do, Mike. What's the way that our people out there on Blog Talk Radio Land can get a hold of you to pick your brain or invite you in for a seminar or something like that?
Let me give you my email. That's probably the easiest. And it's BFD, like Buffalo Fire Department, BFDboss@gmail.com. And
BFDboss@gmail.com.
Correct. And anybody has any questions, I'd be more than happy to talk to them.
Oh, fantastic. And I have a lot more questions. I still have several pages of notes that we're going to get to on another show. I'm going to invite you back if you had fun and would like to, because there's a lot more we could talk about, and I can't thank you enough for taking the time to come on tonight.
Well, Tom, thanks so much for having me, and I'd love to come back. So
fantastic. Well, we will we'll make that work, and I know your buddy Tim Klett, he's been on a couple times, so we got to get you equal with him. So we got to give you equal time, right? Excellent. Thank you so much, Mike, for being on tonight, and I really look forward to talking to you again soon.
Thank you, Tom. Thanks again for having me.
My pleasure, and be safe, brother.
You too. Bye-bye.
Thanks. Just a great night. I could have talked for another couple hours, and I'm sure there's some people out there that are saying, no, don't stop. But again, I think you'd agree in the long run and experience an hour and a half is maybe 2 hours is good for these programs. So we're approaching actually the 2-hour mark, and I just can't thank him enough, and I hope you enjoyed the show tonight. And I want to thank you for listening in. And as I do at every show, if anyone would like, by the way, to get a hold of me, please give my Facebook page a like. It's the Professional Volunteer Fire Department Facebook page, which I update regularly, and I'm going to have the links in there for our female listeners out there, or anybody that would like to forward information to the females regarding the study that's being done on the health and wellness of female firefighters. I'll get that link on there for you. And if anyone would like to reach out to me, I'm on Twitter. My email is TA, as in Thomas Elbert, Merrill, MERRILL, 63 at AOL.com. And you can give me an email or Twitter, or reach out to me on Facebook, even my own personal Facebook page. Give me a friend request. I'd be happy to connect with you. And thank you for listening in tonight. Next show I'm going to have is I believe it'll be in October. The schedule hasn't come out yet. I believe it'll be in October. And again, I'll get that up on Facebook as soon as I know. Actually, I got a very busy October, so hopefully I can fit it in. But again, thanks to our sponsor. Check out Honeywell DuPont FDICscholarship.com to nominate a deserving firefighter in your community, or a deserving firefighter that you know, who you can nominate for an all-expenses-paid trip to FDIC 2018. Thank you so much, Honeywell DuPont, for sponsoring Fire Engineering Blog Talk Radio, my show, the Professional Volunteer Fire Department, and the scholarship opportunity. Absolutely fantastic. I appreciate that. And as I do every show, I'd like to end with a shout-out to a volunteer fire department, a volunteer firefighter, somebody who exemplified professionalism or just absolutely outstanding service as a firefighter. So I always have a lot of people writing in, giving me ideas, or I find them in the trade journals and publications. And as I was thinking of my shout-out for tonight, I think back to how at the beginning of the show, I mentioned how we're in the dog days of summer, and in communities all across North America, that dog days of summer often means that it's the annual local volunteer fire department field days, or picnics, or chicken barbecues, or some type of event hosted by the local volunteer fire department to help raise important funds. So tonight I thought it would be appropriate to give a shout-out to all you volunteer firefighters who this summer are working so hard to prepare for your annual field days, your annual picnic, or assorted other fundraiser, just to keep your department afloat, just to procure the necessary equipment needed to do your job as a professional firefighter. You all have communities that are depending on you to respond in their time of need. And as Chief Lombardo, Commissioner Lombardo, Mike pointed out tonight, they just expect you to show up and take care of their problem. They expect you to be prepared. Yet if you weren't hosting these field days, if you weren't hosting these picnics, if you weren't slapping that barbecue chicken on the grill or pouring that cold beer, there's a very real chance that your community would suffer, and suffer bad. So what do? In addition to training, in addition to taking care of the firehouse, in addition to going to that firehouse board meeting, that firehouse department meeting, that firehouse bylaw meeting, that firehouse grant procurement meeting, in addition to responding to your community's call for help, whatever it might be, here you go putting in so much time, so much effort, so much work to get those grills out, to arrange for the rides, to purchase and seek donations for food, for prizes, and everything else required to pull off that successful fundraiser, that picnic, that field day, that barbecue. And then to make sure it's arranged and arranged for staffing, to make sure it's staffed adequately. And kudos and thank you, too. Let's not forget all those family members who pitch in to help. Family, another iconic hallmark of our American and worldwide volunteer fire service. Our families who support and could dedicate themselves to the firehouse almost as much as you do. Let's not forget them. And then afterwards, a day or 2 or 3 or a week of putting everything together and packaging it all up, doing the final reports and paying off the vendor and making notes for next year. Again, all in between, all the other emergency calls and firehouse details, all to make your department better prepared, more efficient, better equipped, all to serve your community. Who does such things? You do. So tonight I give a tip of the helmet and a special shout out and say job well done to all of you out there who are doing just that. All of you professional volunteer firefighters who are standing by, ready to respond competently and compassionately. So thanks for tuning in tonight. Thank you to all you professional volunteers for everything you do to help share the message. And remember that being professional has nothing to do with earning a paycheck. It has everything to do with delivering competent and compassionate service and taking care of not only just our customers, but our fellow members as well. And developing and maintaining and upholding that professional reputation is the duty and responsibility of all firefighters, paid or volunteer. Tom Merrill for Fire Engineering Radio and the Professional Volunteer Fire Department. Special thanks again to our guest tonight, Chief and Commissioner Mike Lombardo. Fantastic show. Thanks for listening in. We'll talk to you again in about 6 or 7 weeks. Till then, everybody stay safe. God bless. Take care.